to 1, but more importantly, they took the court with a superstar who had a bad case of the flu. However, Dirk Nowitzki knew there's no time to be sick and rest when your team is playing in the NBA Finals. If the Mavericks lost this game, they would be down 3-1 and the series would be all but over. So even though his fever reached the same temperature as Jordan's in the 1997 Finals, and even though during the game he felt so sick that he could not speak, Dirk toughed it out and played 39 minutes in this must-win game. And despite the 102-degree fever he had, he was still his same old dominant self. He led the Mavs to a huge Game 4 victory and finished the game with 21 points and 11 rebounds in an inspiring performance. A performance that also saw the Mavericks trail by 9 points with 10 minutes left before Dirk took over. He scored 10 of his 21 points in the fourth and capped off this incredible display with the game-winning basket. Which brings us to this question: why do people forget about Dirk's flu game? Seriously, when great finals performances are mentioned, we never hear about Dirk fighting through the same fever as Jordan. Sure, Jordan had better stats than Dirk, but still, Dirk fought through the same pain and led his team to a game they absolutely needed to win. The Mavericks would go on to win the next 2 games and take home the 2011 NBA Finals, with Dirk Nowitzki named as the Finals MVP, marking one of the few times in NBA history that a superstar won a championship without a true second star. A remarkable achievement from a man who put on a remarkable performance. Number 4, Kevin McHale. Nowadays, when a star player gets hurt, teams generally play it very safe. They make sure the player fully recovers, is cleared by every doctor, and is on a good HGH regimen before they're allowed to step back on the court. Just kidding about that last part, I hope. Anyway, in the 1980s, this was not the case, a fact that was demonstrated most by Kevin McHale, because towards the end of the 1987 regular season, Kevin McHale broke the navicular bone in his right foot. This is the same injury that Joel Embiid missed 2 seasons for. It's serious. If it's not taken care of correctly, a broken navicular bone can end a career. So this injury should have ended Kevin McHale's season, but the Celtics were title contenders and were only getting older. So McHale chose to play the entire 1987 NBA playoffs on a broken foot. In those playoffs, McHale still managed to average 21.1 points, 9.2 rebounds, and 1.4 blocks, and lead the Celtics to the NBA Finals. In those finals, McHale averaged over 20 points per night on the game's biggest stage, but Boston still lost to the Lakers in 6 games, which to me is just a footnote in this incredible story, because you have to have some massive respect for Kevin McHale. Playing 21 playoff games with a broken foot because his team needed him is one of the most badass and selfless things I've ever heard. Night in and night out, he took the court knowing he was about to be in severe pain, but he just couldn't let his team down. Unfortunately though, this actually has become a cautionary tale, as after this season, Kevin never really fully recovered to his Hall of Fame form after he spent 3 months playing high-level basketball with a serious injury. Number 3, Brandon Roy. Looking back at it right now, the career of Brandon Roy is one of the biggest what-ifs in NBA history, because at the young age of 24, Roy quickly established himself as one of the best guards in the league when he finished as a member of the second-team All-NBA after averaging 22.6 points, 5.1 assists, and 4.7 rebounds a game for a Trailblazer squad that would win 54 games and establish itself as one of the NBA's most promising young teams. Then, just 4 years later, Brandon Roy would find himself on the Minnesota Timberwolves and would retire after that season at the young age of 28. So, what happened? Well, it turns out that Roy had some serious problems with his knees, as by the time of his retirement, the cartilage in his knees had deteriorated so much that Roy suffered from bruises caused by bone-on-bone rubbing, which is just as painful as it sounds. The mere fact that Brandon forced himself to play basketball for years as his knees gave out on him is incredible. The pain he felt night in and night out must have been tremendous. But on top of this, even though his career was cut tragically short, Brandon Roy did give us an iconic NBA moment, because in the third to last game of the 2010 regular season, Roy felt something tear in his right knee. Doctors would find that Brandon had a tear in his meniscus, and he would immediately be ruled out for the rest of the regular season. However, much like Kevin McHale before him, Roy did not want to let his team down, which meant that miraculously, just 1 week after his surgery, Roy took the court for Game 4 of the Trailblazers' first-round matchup against the Suns. His mere presence on the court was everything for Portland. They had their leader back, and it's no surprise that the team was fired up enough to take home a 9-point win after Roy dropped 10 points on a bum knee. The Blazers would go on to lose the next 2 games and the series, but Brandon Roy's return will always stay strong in the memory of Portland Trailblazers fans, because on that night, Roy proved once and for all that he was an absolute warrior on the court, and it's just a shame that we never got to see him play out his full potential. Number 2, Larry Bird. Throughout the course of his Hall of Fame career, Larry Bird solidified himself as a legend by taking home 3 NBA championships and 3 MVPs. Larry Legend had a long career as he played up until the age of 35, but he still left the game with the potential to do even more, as in the last 5 seasons of his career, Bird suffered with serious back injuries that would eventually cause him to become a shell of his former self. As in one of the weirdest NBA injuries of all time, in the summer of 1985, Larry Bird hurt his back while shoveling crushed rock to create a new driveway in his mom's house. Larry, I get that you're old school, but come on, man, pay someone else to do that for you. Because of this injury, Bird would suffer from back pain for the rest of his career, which eventually led to him wearing a 15-pound back brace during games in the 1992 season. It was in this 92 season when Bird had the last iconic moment in his career. Despite the fact that his back was killing him, despite the fact that he was 35 years old, despite the fact that his doctor would later look at his back and say, I don't understand how he played with what he had, Larry Bird dropped 49 points on the Portland Trailblazers, finished with a triple-double, and made this. A ridiculous 3 that sent the game into overtime. The Celtics would end up pulling out an improbable win on this night, but they would be bounced in the first round of the NBA playoffs, and that summer, Larry Bird would retire from the game of basketball. His injured back had robbed us of countless potential great moments in his last few years, but at least our last memory is that of a man who was so talented and so driven that he could score 49 points and finish with a triple-double with an extra 15 pounds on his back. There's a reason he's called Larry Legend. And number 1, Isaiah Thomas. I just want to let it be known right now that Isaiah Thomas's performance in Game 6 of the 1988 Finals was one of the best games produced by anyone in NBA history. But, spoiler alert, this incredible output by Isaiah has largely been forgotten because the Pistons ended up losing Game 6 and 7 to the Lakers and thus went home without a ring that year. They would go on to win the NBA championship the next 2 years, but if it were not for some serious bad luck at the wrong time, then they very well could have ended up with a three-peat. As going back to Game 6 of the 88 Finals, Detroit led the series 3-2 and were just 1 win away from winning their first NBA championship. And in the third quarter, Isaiah began to take over. He became unstoppable, scoring the Pistons' next 14 straight points to cut into the Lakers' lead and give Detroit the game's momentum. Every Lakers fan in the building was convinced that Isaiah was about to play them out of the NBA Finals. But then, everything changed. While leading a fast break, Isaiah stepped on Michael Cooper's foot and immediately went down. There was no doubt that this injury was serious, as Isaiah was clearly in tremendous pain. Despite the pain, Isaiah tried to stand just a minute later, but his leg would just not support him, which makes what happened next all the more incredible. After spending just minutes on the bench, Isaiah took the court again in clear agony, attempting to transfer the pain he felt in his ankle by chewing on his bottom lip. The result was that even though he could barely jog, let alone run, Isaiah continued to take over. He made a one-legged floater, he made an incredible and one over Michael Cooper, he drained a 3, he scored a layup, and he hit an absurd turnaround jumper from deep that gave him a finals record 25 points in a single quarter and gave his team the lead heading into the fourth quarter. Just looking at these shots, you could see just how much pain Isaiah was in, but he wouldn't let his team down. Not when they needed him the most. Like I said though, the Pistons would go on to lose this game and the series, which in the case of Isaiah Thomas's legacy is unfortunate, because Isaiah finished game 6 with 43 points, 8 assists, 6 steals, and 1 healthy ankle. If the Pistons had won game 6, if they had won the NBA Finals, then we'd all remember this as one of the best finals performances in NBA history. And thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this list. So if you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. I make basketball videos like this. I do NBA